Good evening. Welcome to the Biggest Jewish Ideas series. We're on part 5. Tonight's class is called Purpose. And thank you for joining us. Me. Thank you to Adele and Joel Sandberg for dedicating tonight's class in honor of their granddaughter Dalia's bat mitzvah. Mazal tov to Dalia. May Hashem bless you to grow into a proud, learned, pious, Jewish girl, to shine your light to your family, your community, and the entire world. Mazal tov to your family. If you'd like to sponsor or dedicate a class, there's a link in the video description, and that would really help us continue doing what we're doing, and I'd be very, very appreciative for your kindness. So, purpose. What is the purpose of life? Ever asked that question before? Everybody asks that question at some point in time. What's interesting is that that's a very loaded question, and that question shouldn't be taken for granted because that question is based on many assumptions, many premises. Meaning, who said that there is a purpose to life? Who says? Of course, there must be a purpose to life. Really? Why? The only reason why there must be a purpose to life is if you believe in certain things, particularly the beliefs we've been talking about in previous classes in this series. You have to believe in a creator. I'm not going to use the word God, but a creator, meaning the world was created into existence. It didn't used to be, and then it was created. And this creator is wise. And this creator created everything by design, with a plan, with an intention. Nothing is by random, nothing is by accident, nothing just happens. Everything is for a purpose. If you believe in all that, then you can ask the question, what is the purpose of life? What's interesting is that a lot of people perhaps struggle with the core beliefs that I just outlined. Maybe there's a God, maybe there's not a God. Was the world created? Did it always exist? Maybe it existed for billions of years out of a big bang and it just evolved from tiny little cells of matter and became what it is through a process of evolution, random process. Is there design? Is everything orchestrated? Is everything deliberate in our world? Maybe, maybe not. Some people struggle with that belief, but they still have the question, what is the purpose of life? Maybe the answer for that kind of person is there is no purpose to life. Gary's asking the purpose of life or the purpose of my life. That's a really good question. We're going to talk in general terms about the purpose of life, and that will be all life, of all existence. And then that will be a stepping stone to you taking this and personalizing this in your life and me in my life. And maybe we'll touch on that a little as well. Thank you, Gary. So, who said there's a purpose to life? Now, this non-believer, this atheist, this agnostic, you may say, well, I'm going to create a purpose to life, right? I'm going to decide that the purpose of life is to be happy. The purpose of life is to... This talk is not working on Facebook. I just got a message from Roz. Nothing I could do right now other than, sorry. I hope it works out somehow. Or we'll post it tomorrow otherwise. So you could always just personally create a purpose for yourself. So something that you're passionate about, something you're excited about, something you're interested in, something you believe in. The purpose of life is to be happy. The purpose of life is to be generous. The purpose of life is to be loving. The purpose of life is to be charitable. The purpose of life is to be wise. The purpose of life is to study. You can create anything you want, and good for you, and it'll bring your life a purpose. It'll give you a reason to wake up in the morning. It'll give you a measuring stick through which to measure the success of your life. But realize that it would be hard to argue that's the real purpose of life. That's the purpose that you decided and you created, which is very nice, but that's not talking in absolute definitive terms. And what I'm trying to talk about this evening is in absolute definitive terms. I'm suggesting or I'm postulating there is an absolute purpose to life because I believe in all the premises that I outlined earlier. And now the question becomes, what is that purpose? So, assuming there's a creator who created the universe by design with intention and there was a reason for it all, what's the reason? What's the purpose? You may say, or it is said, in fact, rightfully so, the purpose of life is, for example, to be kind, to be giving, to be forgiving, to be humble, to be happy, to get married, to have relationships, to be good in society, to volunteer, to dedicate yourself to the cause, to a cause, to build a family. True. These are all beautiful things. If a person dedicates their life just to these things, you're in good shape. No question about it. Let's go further. Let's look what the Torah says. The Torah in two places seems to give the purpose of life. So you may recall at the very beginning of the Torah, when Adam and Chava, Adam and Eve were created, they were given instructions by God. Now that you're created, what are you supposed to be doing? So God says to Adam and Chava, Adam and Eve, I want Peru Uruvu, I want you to multiply, to replenish, to populate the earth, V'chivshuha, and conquer it. He gives also a similar command to Noah after the flood to replenish the earth. And he says, you as the humans have to master the universe, conquer the universe, have dominion over the fish in the sea, over the fowl in the air, over every living thing that moves upon the earth. We need to think about what that means. What is the role of the human mastery over the rest of creation, the animal kingdom, the plant world, and the mineral world? I'm not going to go into that at great length, but I'm giving you another suggestion of what the purpose of life is. Human mastery over the world, preserving the world, protecting the world, maximizing the potential of the world. Here's another source in the Torah. When the Jews are surrounding Mount Sinai, ready to receive the Torah after having left Egypt, God gives the command, the instruction, the proclamation, and he says, Va'atem tiyu li, you shall be for me, Mamlechet Kohanim v'goy kadosh, a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. Your purpose in life is to be holy, like a priest. Again, we need to explore further, not for this class, what does that mean to be a priest? What does it mean to be holy? But here's another example of the purpose of life. So we have many purposes that I've just described to you, which are all beautiful and all sound very reasonable and would make for a very meaningful, purposeful life if you live this way. However, there's a flaw. There's a problem with all these answers. Why? Because these answers are all based on an assumption or based on a pre-existing condition. What's that pre-existing condition? The condition is that you are born, you exist. The world was created, the world exists. And now that we exist and we have the mind, the freedom of thought, the conscience to be able to think and ask ourselves and think existentially. So now we ask ourselves the question, what is the purpose of this soul? Why am I here? What should I be doing with this life? I live only for a short amount of time, 120 years. I'm not here for very long. How do I make the most of it? Say, yeah, we have answers. Live charitably, live generously, live humbly, live dedicated to others, build relationships, work for causes that help humanity, be happy, be forgiving, be kind, build a family. Do all these things, and you will live a meaningful life. Now, by the way, there are others who would come up with different answers. Some people may come up with an answer, pursue money, get rich. Or, that's one kind of attitude. Another kind of hedonistic attitude might be, you're here for a short time, maximizing the most amount of life's pleasures that you can. Eat the best foods, travel to the finest places in the world, the greatest attractions, indulge in all kinds of pleasures that suit your heart or your body. Just live it up, Maybe that works for some people. Maybe for that, there's a meaningful life for them. The problem is, or the unanswered question is, I want to take us a step back for a moment. Don't assume that we were born, that we exist. Let's go backwards. Let's go to before you were born. Let's go to before the world was created into existence. And let's ask ourselves, why should we create the world? Why should God create the world? Why should we create you? Why should you be born? Now, you can't tell me be born in order to be kind to others. Be born in order to be happy. Be born in order to raise a family. That makes no sense. I don't exist yet to fill that life with happiness or generosity or kindness or building family. I have a better answer. Just don't exist. Don't be born. If you don't be born, you've solved the problem. Instead of being born and then having the quandary, what should I do now with this life? I have that easier solution. Don't be born, right? There's a famous opinion. There's a debate in the Talmud. Hillel said, it's better for a person that you were created. Shammai said, it's better for a person if you would not have been created. We say this in the Yom Kippur prayers, actually, which is an interesting meditation to have. Which is better? Maybe it's better that we should not have been created. Normally we rule like Hillel over Shammai. So take it to heart. It's better that you were created. But we could ask existentially and go deeper and think about, if I would not have been created, if the world would not have been created, there'd be no concept of or need for love and kindness and generosity and peace. There's no world, there's no life to exist. So the bigger question that we're going to talk about right now is, why must the world have been created? Why must you exist? And none of the answers that we gave satisfy that question. The Torah says mankind should be the master over the rest of the world. Great. Once the world is created, you need to be the master over the rest of the world so that it can function normally. But there's a better answer, perhaps. Don't create a world. There's no animals, there's no plants, there's no world. There's no need for mankind to master over the world. Live a holy life. In other words, be born in this world, and instead of getting carried away by crass physical desires, bodily earthly desires that are the impulse of your body, live a holy life. We'll talk more about this a bit later. There's a better answer. Don't be born in this physical world. Don't come down here. And then there's nothing to caution, but make sure you're being holy. Yeah, I'm in heaven. I don't have to be holy. There's no heavens exist. I'm not even in heaven. That's the big question. Why the need for all of this to have been created? That's question number one. Question number two, a really big question, maybe a bigger question. We are told, and it only makes sense, that the Creator, we're going to call him God, but you can use any word you want, is perfect. And we've spoken about this, I think, in the first class of the series. Of course, God is perfect. More perfect than we can think what perfect is. I mean, in our world, we can think you have the perfection of strength and perfection of wisdom and perfection of grace and perfection of kindness and perfection of humility and perfection of peace and perfection of truth. That's within our human realm, what we can imagine what perfection is. None of us can or will ever attain that, but we can imagine what the perfect, idyllic human would be. God is much more than that. He's the perfection of perfection. He created those things. So of course, he's the perfection of that, plus much more. Now, conversely, when we talk about a purpose, if something has a purpose, what you're implying is that in and of itself, it is incomplete and it needs to fulfill its purpose to be complete. That's the idea of a purpose. I want to live, right? So if I'm hungry and then I find food for myself, so that food serves the purpose of satiating my hunger. If I need shelter as a human being, the shelter serves the purpose of protecting me from the rain or the cold or the sun, so I'm protected. A person is lonely by themselves, so getting into relationships serves the purpose of fulfilling the need of the loneliness. This is all with human beings. In other words, it comes from an imperfection. But God is perfect. If God is perfect, What does it even mean to talk about purpose? Did God have a purpose in what he did, in what he does? It doesn't make any sense. God is not hungry. There's no purpose of food. God is not lonely. There's no purpose of relationships. God is not poor. There's no purpose in wealth. God is not unprotected from the elements and no purpose in shelter. God doesn't need anything. If God doesn't need anything because he's the absolute perfection of everything in and of itself, it just is. Remember that word that we spoke about God, the pure isness, the truest, realest reality. Then it's hard to imagine what purpose means. There's no purpose to anything. No purpose is needed because it just is perfect and is just fine the way it is. So can we even talk about a purpose? God created the world in order to what? What was he missing they needed to create the world? He wasn't missing anything. Well, if he wasn't missing anything, then why would he create a world? Why would he do anything? But he created it. Well, maybe he created it for a pointless reason because he definitely didn't need it, right? That's the second question. And now a final question. Even if you can imagine, even if you're going to discover an answer to explain why there is a purpose to the world, to creation, to existence, why God did need to do this, why there was a purpose and intention for doing all of this creation. Another question still remains. We know that there are many worlds. There are higher worlds and lower worlds, spiritual worlds and physical worlds. Our physical mind and body and eyes are only aware of this physical plane, but Jewish spiritual wisdoms and others as well teach us about higher worlds, higher realities, different dimensions of existence. Talk about angels and other kinds of things, and these are all real and true. Just because your eyes and mind can't see or understand it doesn't mean it's not true. There's a lot of things that your eyes and your ears and your mind cannot understand. Don't dismiss them as not being true. Just because we're small and we're limited doesn't mean things are not big. So those higher worlds are much more perfect, much more beautiful, much more holier, much more spiritual worlds than ours. So to assume that God needed for some reason to create a world, well, I could imagine that the higher, more spiritual, devout worlds and the service of the angels in them, that could fulfill a need for God if there was such a need. But why our world? Why a physical world? Why a physical world of bodies and physicality around us and distraction and desire and temptation and challenges and choices and difficulties and so many things that are diverting our attention away from that which is real, true, important, purposeful, real, God, holy, spiritual? Why would there be a purpose in our world? What's the point of it? What did anybody gain from this? Those are the big questions. L'chaim. Okay. So, there is an answer that is brought down in the Holy Zohar, the great, perhaps most famous Kabbalistic work of the Zohar. And the Zohar says as follows. I'm going to read a small passage from a long text of the Zohar. The purpose, the reason why God created the world was in order that there be creatures that will know him in every measure by which he directs his world with kindness and with judgment according to the acts of humankind. For if his light would not spread to each of his creations, how would he be known? In what way would be fulfilled the verse that says, and all the earth will be filled with his glory? That's the Zohar. In other words, the Zohar says, you know what the purpose of creation, why God chose to create anything at all? Was in order that creations will get to know God. In order that the extent of God's potential, God's possibilities, God's power, God's awesomeness will be known. Like the Arizal explains, the great Kabbalist Rabbi Yitzchak Luria. He says, without the act of creation, all of God's infinite perfections lie in a state of potential. Creation is something like the expression of an artist bringing that potential into actual, right? So if you're an artist, or even if you're not, but you can imagine, maybe you're an artist through art, through painting, through drawing, through building, through sculpturing, through music, singing, composing, whatever kind of art it is. You have a lot of skill. You have a lot of potential. There's a song waiting to be written. There's a sculpture waiting to be made. There's a painting waiting to be painted. It's in you, meaning you have the potential for it. But if you haven't actually done it, you haven't, I guess, manifested that skill, or you haven't proven that skill. You haven't brought the potential into actuality, into actualization. Same thing with God. God is an artist. There's this expression that God is called an artist, and we refer to all of the creation and God's handiwork as an art, which is a wonderful metaphor, perhaps for another time, to think about the artistic element to all of existence and creation. But if God would not have created the world, right? How does God create a world? That is an expression, a manifestation of God's infinite power. We've spoken about this a few times. To go from nothing to something, to create something ex nihilo, to go from nothingness, meaning just a state of pure godliness, God's infinite light, and from there to make the giant, enormous, infinite leap into a state that is almost absent of God's infinite light, and now a creation independent in its own existence, is a work of art that is of infinite potential, infinite skill. So if God would not have created the world, no one would have seen it. Imagine the artist didn't come up, with that painting. No one would have seen it. No one would have had it. The world would not have seen such beautiful art. You'd be missing out. Now that God creates, everybody gets to see the magnificence, the brilliance, the awe, the power of God's potential, of God's abilities. That's the reason why God created the world, says the Zohar. By the way, just want to add a point, just if you want to, touching on this idea, how existence and creation is an expression of the infinite power of God. Think about it further, just to illuminate this greatness. Going off topic for a moment, but it's a beautiful concept that I once heard from one of my teachers. Let's say you want to express your ability in intellect, in wisdom. So you are, you've studied and you're a renowned professor, student of a particular field of knowledge, a particular field of science, perhaps. We want to know, how great is your knowledge? How great is your wisdom? Are you a master more than anybody else? So it's not, have you read one more book than anyone else has read? You've come up with one more formula than anyone else has. Okay, and then we say, no, you can even walk into a room with the world's highest, greatest, most achieved scientists in that field, and you can teach them new things so that you're way above everybody else. Wow, now you're really great. You know what's even greater? You know what displays your skill, your wisdom, your mastery even greater than that? If you can go over to a 10-year-old child who knows nothing, not about the science, not about the concept, not about the terminology, nothing at all. And you can explain the formula, the concept to him or her, and they understand it. That's a real mastery. It's the greatest skill. So we have to appreciate sometimes our teachers that are able to teach our young children, and that they can actually understand not only simple concepts, but profound concepts. Children can understand profound concepts. It's about a teacher is able to deliver profound concepts in such ways, meaning the power, the extent of the mastery of your knowledge is so deep, so profound that you can send it out, you can manifest it so far and so low that not just somebody on your wavelength gets it, but you're going to have to come up with all kinds of different language and metaphors and examples and parables to be able to communicate it to such a low intellectual level. But the higher you are, the cleverer you are, the greater mastery you have, the more you'll be able to do that. So that's a display of a real mastery of intellect. But yet, that's not infinite power. Because at the end of the day, the gap between you and the 10-year-old child is a big gap, but not an infinite gap. It's possible the 10-year-old child could become like you one day, right? So it's not infinite. What would be an expression of infinite wisdom? Imagine that you can communicate and teach your wisdom to a rock. And the rock understands it. Sounds crazy, right? It is crazy because rocks don't understand. But if you could do that, then you've expressed an infinite power to your wisdom. You've leaped over new worlds. You've allowed intellect to leave the realm of intellect, the realm of humanity for that matter, and entered into a different sphere, a different realm, the realm of the inanimate mineral world, a rock. If you could do that, there's an infinite power going on over here. Now, no humans can ever do that. I don't think. No humans have infinite power to any talent or skill they have in life. But this gives us to appreciate the infinite power of God, because God did just that. When God radiated his infinite light to create, he didn't just create spiritual things, spiritual beings, spiritual worlds. He created a physical world. The space of our physical world is like the rock compared to the intellect of the professor. There is no connection. There's no relationship. There's no comparison between the two. You have to cross infinite bounds to be able to send this to over there. And God did just that. So by creating our world, right, we asked the question before, maybe God wants to create higher worlds, more spiritual worlds, holier worlds, but why our world? What did he gain from that? Well, according to the Zohar, if the whole point of creating was to manifest the potential of God's abilities, then it's greatest expressed in our world. That's an interesting concept, interesting answer. However, a question is raised on this answer. And the question goes like this. This idea that we give the metaphor of the artist, but it could be anybody who has a skill for something, and you have the potential, when the skill is in a state of potential, and then you want to express it and actualize it. Now, before you actualize it, it's within you in a potential state. And it's lacking in terms of the actualization. It's not visible, it's not manifest, it's not known, it's not felt, it's not seen. And then you have to cross the border between the potential and actual and do it. This idea, this distinction, this reality is a human reality. It exists in our world. It does not exist in the world of the Creator, in the world of God, in the world of the infinite. In the world of the infinite, says the question that the Hasidic Rebbe, Reb Shalom Dov Ber of Lubavitch, the Rebbe Rashab, 100 years ago, he asks in one of his great discourses, 115 years ago, he says that God is both the artist and the art in a perfect whole. I'll read a quote. He says, "For a created being, what is potential is not actual. But above, with God, this is not so. Potential is not lacking actuality. Potential and actual exist as one." Pause. We have to think about that, and actually we're never going to understand that, other than we could understand how it's necessary to say that, even though we can't actually experience that. We only know about the difference between potential and actual. But in the realm of the infinite, there's no distinction. Potential and actual, there's no distance between them, because this is the infinite light, the infinite ability of the infinite God. The actual, the art already exists with the potential for the art. That's how it goes. So, hold on a minute. How could the Zohar say that the purpose of God creating the world was in order for God to actualize and manifest his potential abilities? Before God created anything, and God was just pure infinite light that filled all of space of existence, and there was no space. Was the potential lacking an actualization? No. Again, if potential is lacking in actualization, you are saying that God is imperfect. Go back to our original point. But God is not imperfect, God is perfect, meaning one of the expressions of perfection is that every potential is already an actual without expressing or manifesting the actual. It just is. The manifestation, the need for the actualization is our need in our imperfect world, not for God. So therefore, why would God need that actualization if he already has it in his infinite existence pre-creation of anything? Here's another answer offered by the Arizal, the great Kabbalist Rabbi Yitzchak Luria, 16th century, end of his life, lived in Israel, buried in Tzfat. Perhaps the most authoritative Kabbalist that we know of, that we have. He gave a different answer, a different twist, and it goes like this. I'm going to read a little quote. When it arose in God's will to create the world in order to do good to his creatures, that they might recognize his greatness and the merit to be a vehicle for that which is above, to bond with him, and blessed be he. He added something here, which the Zohar did not mention. He said, it arose in God's will to create a world in order to do good to his creatures. In order to do good. God had a need to do good. Why? Because God is good. And when you are good, you want to do good. Different than the artist metaphor of before. The artist metaphor is I, the artist, have a need to actualize my potential. It's about me, in a way. God was like, I'm going to do all this so that everybody can recognize me, my abilities. Here's the other way around. Here, it's like a philanthropist who's kind, generous, has a lot of money. You could have someone with a lot of money and is not a good person, therefore feels no need to do good to benefit others. But a kind, good, wealthy person sees needs, sees people who are lacking, sees needs all around them, and they say, well, I have the means, and I really want to see that person, that community, that organization benefit, be sustainable, grow, be able to live normally. I want to do good to you. I want to see your needs met. So God is good and wants to therefore do good so that the recipients can benefit from goodness. And so I'm going to create a world, says God, with humans and animals and plants and whatever is inside this world so that I can tend to all their needs. Amazing. The whole point of our existence is because God wants to do good to us. That's how much he loves us. That's how much he cares about us. He created us just to be able to do good for us. Wow. But does that make any sense? No. First of all, who decided that a good person has a need to express their goodness? Or a good person has a need to actually provide goodness to others so that others should benefit from my goodness? Right? You have like Avraham Avinu. Avraham was the paradigm of chesed, of kindness. So much so that the Medrash tells us when Avram was born, the spiritual agent of kindness in the world came to God and complained, God, since Abraham was born, I'm out of a job because Abraham is doing all the kindness in the universe. And Abraham receives his Brit Milah, his circumcision at 99 years old. And so God puts the sun out there. So it's got a very hot day. So there should be no travelers, no passerby. So no one's going to come to Abraham's tent, his hotel, and disturb him. Abraham still, he's day 1, day 2, day 3, the most painful day after circumcision. He's still sitting outside his tent looking for visitors. How could it be? You're 99 years old. You just had a surgery. Why aren't you resting up? You're in pain. What are you doing out there? What's the answer? That's the nature of somebody who's kind. Somebody who's kind just wants to continue doing kindness. If I'm kind, I could sit in my house all by my own, and be kind, meaning I am kind. I'm not able to practice kindness because I'm my own, but I am kind. But if I am kind, the nature is I want to do kindness. I want to go out there. I want to meet the people. I want to see which needs I can meet. That's what Abraham was doing. But that concept that somebody who's good wants to do goodness and someone who's kind wants to be kind, that's the nature that God created in our world. But before anything was existed, before anything was created, did that nature exist? Is God bound by that nature? We're saying that God was good and kind and therefore had this need to be able to express and show their kindness to benefit others. Really? Did God have that kind of need? Or did he just create that when he created the need? But if he would not have created that concept, then there wouldn't be the concept of God needing to share his goodness and kindness with others. That's question number one. Question number two is, again, we're back to the problem of God's perfection. If I'm kind and I'm not able to exercise and practice my kindness, there's an imperfection going on. I am lacking something. We're suggesting, it seems like, according to the Arizal, that God was lacking. He was good, he was kind, but he had nobody to be good to, nobody to serve, nobody to improve their lives. So he creates a whole world to improve their lives. So God is lacking? And if he would not have created the world, would God be missing something? It sounds like he would be. How can you say that? And finally, I could understand, perhaps, based on this answer, why God wants to create higher worlds, spiritual worlds, holier worlds. Angels and all the other kinds of things that exist over there. And they should be beneficiaries of God's kindness, God's goodness, God's flow of energy, the gift of life itself. Perfect. But why our world? Why us? What's that again from this kind of kindness? Again, it's like, let's create the most impoverished, the most poor person so that we have more of a need to fulfill. I can imagine higher world should satisfy that need already. Why our world? If the physical world would not exist, there'd be other places God can be kind and good to. So, I'm not, heaven forbid, suggesting that the Zohar is wrong, the Arizal is wrong, Chas v'Shalom. These are our holy works by our holy masters, and they knew exactly what they were saying. Of course, they're true and they're right, but what I would argue is that they're talking on a particular level, and on a particular level, they're correct. And I'm actually not going to go into that now, but we could explore different dimensions, different levels of the Godhead, the God persona, and how their answers satisfy some of those levels, so to speak. But we're going a little deeper here, and we're challenging these answers because we're going to the top, to the highest of the high, to the essence of all. And we're asking the biggest question on the biggest, deepest, most essential level of God. We're asking, if God is perfect, he lacks, his potential lacks no actualization, his goodness lacks no deficiency of being unable to express his goodness, why on earth did God create anything? And therefore, what's the purpose of everything that exists and of ourselves? Here is the deepest of answers. It's alluded to in a midrashic teaching, in the midrash, many long time ago, but it's more elaborately explained by the Alter Rebbe, the first Chabad Rebbe in the Tanya, the famous work, and then by many of the subsequent Rebbes after. And they say as follows. Listen to this. This is the deepest of the deep. This is the answer. The answer. The Medrash teaches. I'm going to give a formula, and then we're going to break down this formula. God desired to have a home in the lowest of realms. That's it. That's the whole answer. God desired to have a home in the lowest of realms. And that's why He created a world, and that's why he created all the way until the lowest of worlds, which is ours. Now, there's four big words over here which are very undefined, and they're the key to understanding this. First of all, God. What are we talking about? Which level? What kind of God? What's the nature of this God? Desired. What is a desire? Why does God desire? Is a desire an expression of an imperfection or not? What is a godly desire? God desires to have a home. What's the nature of a home? As opposed to a world, as opposed to any other kind of dwelling space. No, he desires the home in the lowest of realms. What is the nature? What is the meaning of the lowest of realms? God desire home, lowest realms. Let's figure this out together. When we say God desired, the definition of a desire is as follows. Think about this. What do you desire? Tell me something you desire. So you're going to give me an answer, yeah? I'm going to say, why do you desire that? Are you able to supply a reason for that? Now, you may be able to. You may be able to say, I desire that because it's good for my life, it's healthy, it's fun, it's enjoyable, it's pleasurable, it's beneficial, or whatever. The moment you are supplying me an answer, it's not really a desire. It's a logical choice. There are clear benefits from it, which is why you want it, because it is logical. The true nature of a desire that's purely a desire, is one that is illogical, without explanation. That is its strength. That's what makes it a desire. For example, have you ever desired something that seems so irrational, that seems so unreasonable, that seems to make no sense, that seems to have no benefit? And someone would ask you, why on earth? And what will you answer? I don't know. I just desire it. That's a real desire. That's the power of desire. It's like the power of will. The power of will is one that consumes you. It's the strongest power you have. When you have a power of something that is logical, that is intellectually important for a particular reason, beneficial, whatever. So your connection to it, your attraction to it may be strong, but is limited to the amount of reason, the amount of rationale, the amount of intellect that can support it. I like this thing because it's healthy for me. Well, how healthy is it for you? And what would be the major harm if you would be unhealthy for a moment? So all of these things could limit the extent of my attraction for this thing. But if I like this thing, if I want this thing, and I have no reason for it, there's no explanation for it, just desire. How strong is that desire? Infinitely strong. It is one with my essence. My whole being just wants it. Think of it like a craving. I'm not sure if I've ever had a craving, but maybe some of the women in their pregnancy have a craving. And I've been the recipient end of some cravings at the craziest hours of the nights for the craziest things. And like, doesn't make any sense. And that craving is so strong because it doesn't make any sense. That's the power of a desire. We talk about God desiring. We're actually saying that there is no logical, reasonable rationale that should compel or which should tempt or influence God to create anything. God does not have to create anything at all. God is the perfection of all perfection. He was missing nothing, lacking nothing. Why do it? No reason. There is no explanation other than God desired. So therefore, when we say God desired, what's this God that desires? What's the person that desires? Right? When it's, I want the apple because it's healthy. It's not my essence gravitating towards the apple. It's my mind. It's my logic that wants the apple, right? Because it's healthy for me. It's a part of me, a limited part of me that wants it. And I could be persuaded out of it also because it's not me. But when I have an unexplainable desire, it is coming from me, from my essence. It is, like I said, it consumes all of me, right? So it's the essence of self that truly desires something. So the God that desired is the essence of the Godhead. God in his most essential form desires. Now, you're going to ask, God has desires. Desires may not be may not imply a kind of lack of perfection, because I wasn't missing any. The desire is not fulfilling a need, right? As we said, but still, God has desires. And what kind of God has desires? Control yourself. God, come on. God doesn't have to have any desires. It's true, but God is infinite, and the idea, I guess, is that God decided he wants to have a desire. This is deep. He doesn't naturally have a desire because he's God, but he can, and therefore does, want to have a desire. And once he wants to have a desire, then that desire becomes his desire, which becomes the desire of the essence of self, the essence of God that consumes and connects with the essential core of God. That becomes the nature of a true desire. But it's because God decided that way. So what does the essential Godhead desire? What lies at the essence of your soul, the essence of your heart? Right? You tell me, I want to eat a meal, right? I want to go on a vacation. Okay, we have a lot of wants. I want the new watch. I want the car. I want a lot of things. You really, really want that? Who is you, really, right? I'd love to have a vacation. If I wouldn't get my vacation, no, I could still live. If I could still live, then it's not me that really desires to have that vacation, because if my essence really desired it, then I wouldn't be able to live without it until I got it. Like the craving. So we're asking now, if you'd ask yourself, what would your essence desire? What's the essential desire of any person? Because that would describe your life if you thought about that. Well, now we're asking about what's the essential desire of God? And there's an answer to that. It's the answer that God decided he wants to desire. What was the desire? This God desires a home in the lowest of realms. A home in the lowest of realms. The lowest of realms is our physical world. Why? Because this world is the darkest world, where all of the creative power of the Creator, all of godliness, is completely hidden, almost absent. We spoke about the evolution of creation in previous classes, where everything was once this infinity of godliness, and then slowly there's this diminishment, less infinite light of God and more existence of otherness. So the very first spiritual worlds that were created were just slight slivers, traces of otherness, overwhelmed by the infinite light creative force of God. As that light got further diminished, then another world was created, which was a larger sense of otherness, a larger sense of independence, of being its own being, but still with a significant amount of the light of God filling that world. But as things diminished further and further and further, the more otherness existed and the less of godliness exists. And then God hit rock bottom, or we hit rock bottom. And that rock bottom is this place where there seems to be no existence of godliness. Look around you. You don't see it. Nothing in this world proclaims it. Everything in this world proclaims the opposite. I look at this table, I look at the chair, I look at my computer screen, I look at it. You know what these things proclaim to me? They proclaim, I exist. Do they turn your attention to their creator? Do they turn your attention to something higher than them? Absolutely not. To the contrary, they say, I am I. This is the natural ego of all existence, ego of all humans. All humans have the same ego. Basically, we say, I am I. I don't naturally say, I am a product of, I am a creation of, and therefore dedicate my life to. No, we don't actually say that, right? If we did, then we wouldn't have to be here talking about this. So we're the lowest of realms. We're the place of seemingly absolute spiritual darkness. God, the essence of God, desires a home in the lowest of realms. What's a home? What's unique about your home? Your home is the one space in the world where you can be truly you. Truly. Now, what it is that's truly you and what freedoms do you allow yourself in your home, in your own bedroom, in your own bathroom, I'll leave that to your imagination. But there are things you would only do, or ways you would behave, or ways you would talk, or noises you would make only in your home. You wouldn't do it anywhere else. Certainly not in public, certainly not in your office, certainly not with other people in the bar, even if you're with the closest friends. You're not at home. You can have wonderful lives, wonderful good times, other places. You go on a vacation, you stay in a hotel, you're great life. I'm doing wonderful, fun, exciting, enjoyable, pleasurable things. But it's not my space. It's not where I am truly I. I am truly I in my home. That's the power of a home. That's why a home is so important. That's why a safe home is so important, especially for our children. There should be a place where they are safe and free and trusted to be themselves. Adults too. God desires the home in the lowest of realms. God wants to be God. God wants to be manifest in all of his glory, in his essential self, in this lowest realm. That's why he created the world. So he can be, it's a super counterintuitive idea. You would imagine, where does God feel at home the most? In higher worlds, in spiritual worlds, in holy places. In our world, he should feel like a stranger, a place that's so unwelcoming to him. And yet God says, as the desire goes, my home, I want it, and it can only be in the lowest of realms, in our world. The essence of godliness can only exist or only feel at home and only truly be present in a place that seems to be the absolute absence of that, of him. It's hard to think about this, but here I want to give you an example. Let's talk about life. What's life, right? Where do you see life itself most? Now, I'm not talking about the externals of life, the expressions of life, fun, good times, exercising wisdom, exercising other faculties. You can see that in a lot of places, the great professor, the tourist, fine. But life itself, you know where you feel life itself? Two examples: a child or a gravely sick person. A child has no major intellect, hasn't been to school, is not traveling around, has no independence, has no developed faculties, just a very simple child. A baby. There's nothing to be impressed about a baby. I'm sorry to say that. They're not even talking. There's no wisdom. There's no, how do you have a good time with them? You can't drink with them. You can't talk. You can't converse. You can't play sports. You can't go running around with them. Well, you can't do anything with a baby. And yet, that's where you feel the presence of true life. Or with a very gravely ill person who's perhaps close to a comatose state, without any exercising any power of their faculties anymore. Their mind is worn down, their body's worn down, and they're lying on the hospital bed or in the home. And in that presence of your loved one, what's the one thing you pray for? You say, I want to have another day with this person. Why? You can't talk to them. They're not talking back. You can't joke with them. You can't study with them. You can't philosophize with them. You can't go on walks. You can't go on trips. You can't do anything with them. And yet I want another day. What is it that you want? You know what you want? Their life itself. Now, in other words, with the absence of all of the complexities and beauties of life, is the truest expression of life itself. Well, the same thing it is spiritually. In the higher worlds where godliness is more overt, is more apparent, there you have the glory, the beauty, the magnificence of God. In the absence of that beauty and glory and magnificence, and the absence of the revealed God, you have the potential for the essence of God Himself. The essence of God Himself can only be discovered, realized, felt, and experienced in this world. We human beings can access that. No being, no spiritual, angelic being in higher worlds could ever access that. This is God's home, or this can become God's home if we do our work. So God desires a home in the lowest of realms is basically the mission statement of you and I. If God desires that, then He creates this potential place for His home called the lowest of realms, and then He creates you and I and all the agents of the world, and He says, go make it happen. You are my partner. You're going to build this for me. Or I'm not there. You're there. You're going to bring me there. Build me a home for me to exist in all of my essence. And that is our mission statement. I want to give some practical examples of this to make this really grounded. Some religions or some people think that it's sort of a fault that we're created or we exist as earthly physical beings. It's, it's better in another world. It's better in higher worlds. It's better if we were more of an angelic state. It's better if we suppress human bodily needs or activities. So some religions run after the heavens. Some religions all they talk about is the reward you get in heaven. Even in Judaism, some people talk about that a lot. The reward in heaven. Even in this world, some religions say the holier people should abstain from relations, abstain from eating, abstain from physical pleasure, indulgence. Right? Let's be as angelic as we could. That's not what God wants. God doesn't want a home in a holy place, in an angelic world. He wants a home in the lowest of realms. He created you a human with human needs. One of the human needs are to eat, to drink, to sleep, to exercise, to have relations, to build a family. If those are human needs, then God creates them, then they're important. But God says, make them holy. In other words, you could have three different scenarios. You could have a scenario where a person indulges. Let's talk about eating. I'll tell you something interesting. Maimonides was the first person to codify, pretty much the first person to codify Jewish law into sections, into categories. He organized Jewish law. He created the book called the Mishnah Torah, 14 books of Jewish law. And they all have their names, right? The section of Zmanim. Zmanim means times. Those are all the festivals described, the special times of the year. The section of Nashim, which is laws pertain to women. Nashim means women. The section of Mishpatim, civil law, all different categories. There's one book called the Book of Kedusha, the Book of Holiness. Which laws did the Maimonides choose to include in the Book of Holiness? Which are the holy laws, the laws that make you holy? So you would imagine the laws of prayer must be there, the laws of Shabbat must be there, the laws of Yom Kippur must be there, the laws of who knows what. None of them are in that book. There's only two kinds of laws in the Book of Holiness. One is the book of foods, forbidden foods, and one is the book of sexuality, the laws of sexuality and forbidden sexual relations. Those are the only two discussions in the Book of Kedusha, the Book of Holiness. What's going on over here? You couldn't find anything more holy in the Torah? The answer is so beautiful. If you're holy because you're engaged in prayer, you're holy because you're engaged in something esoteric, no. You're an angel. Big deal. God says, I have plenty of angels. That's not my desire. My desire is to exist in my home in the lowest of realms. If you're holy, when you're exercising, when you're involved with the most physical, mundane, crass activities of life, that's my home, says God. That's where I truly am. That's where you're me and I'm with you. Let's talk about eating, right? Very important activity of life. You can have three different scenarios of eating. You have one person who says, I'm alive, I exist, I'm hungry, I want to eat. I like this food, I want to eat this food. Why? Because I'm hungry and I like myself and I like this food and I'm going to eat. How much am I going to eat? As much as I want to. That's a person that's erred on the side of his physical side has taken him over. He's become a beast, so to speak. He really is just a body without a soul. Then you have the esoteric philosopher, holy saint, who says, I'm hungry, but food, it's so unbecoming of me, a human being. I'm not an animal. I'm not a cow pasturing, grazing on grass a whole day. I'm involved in intellect. I study, I read, I develop talents, I play music, I'm artistic. I have holier pursuits, more profound, more refined pursuits. Food, spending my time eating food is so unbecoming of the profound me. However, what should I do? God created me this way. I don't want to waste too much time. I'll just eat a few scraps, make do with a little bit of whatever, and then I'm out of here. Beautiful. You're a holy saint. You're an angel. Trying to be one. But that's not where God finds his home. God finds his home in the lowest of realms. Sit down. I'm hungry. Therefore, I want to eat. But I recognize that this food I'm about to eat, the activity of eating could be a very physical, bestial experience. It could really bring me down, weigh me down physically and emotionally and metaphorically as well. So I want to turn my eating into a holy experience. I'm going to turn my eating into a holy experience. This is where God's going to find his home. How do you turn eating into a holy experience? First of all, you don't eat just whatever you want. That's bestial. You eat what you're supposed to eat or what you should be eating, meaning it's kosher. But I like this other food that's not kosher. It's not about you. It's about sanctifying your eating. It's healthy, but I don't care for healthy. Who are you? You're not in charge over here. You are living a life in accordance with God's will. So eat healthy. I want to eat more than I need. Well, no. If I'm sanctifying my eating, I'm going to eat as much as I need. I'm going to make a blessing. I'm going to be intentional about my eating. I'm going to eat in a way that nourishes me so that I can use this energy to be able to do good activities afterwards. You've just sanctified the act of eating. Sanctify the act of sexual relations. Sanctify the act of marriage, the act of building family, the act of community. Don't be the hermit that sort of separates yourself, goes on the mountain, smokes your hashish, levitates, prays, fasts for 40 days, and lives the holy life away from society. You can do that, but that's not the home for God. The home for God is you're in society, you're part of the business, you're part of the community, you're part of the messiness of interpersonal relations with others, and it's complicated. And in that place, instead of getting carried away and to become selfish and narcissistic and self-centered and pursuing your own needs and your own desires, think about others, think about the community, think about the greater good, think about giving, think about compromising, think about forgiving. You've just sanctified your place in this interpersonal space. Where is truth? Where is God truly found? Here in this world, not in any other world. In the most physical of activities. So you ask, what is the purpose of life? The purpose of life is simple, hard, a big mission, a big undertaking, a big asking for us, but it's a simple process. The purpose of life is to turn our physical lives into a holy life. Not to be consumed by our physical life, not to evade and escape from our physical life, but to turn it into a holy life. You know, I'm going to end in a moment because we're over time, but I just want to give you an example. Called Israel, yesh lehem chelek olam haba. All Jews have a portion in the world to come. Olam haba. We speak about olam haba. What is olam haba? The end of days, what's going to be, right? When Mashiach comes. So there's a famous dispute, in fact, between Maimonides and Nachmanides, the Rambam and the Ramban. And the Rambam is of the opinion that the holiest of worlds is the higher spiritual world, not in this world, right? So he quotes the famous passage. I'll quote you the Rambam here. The Rambam says, just like a blind person cannot appreciate color, nor a deaf person can hear sound, nor a castrate desires sexual pleasure, similarly, the physical body cannot appreciate spiritual delight. Here in this world, you can never, in your own physical body, in your constraints, you can never appreciate true spirituality. The physical body only appreciates physical delight and sensual pleasure, like food, drink, and sexual pleasure. The greatest achievement and the ultimate goal is to attain true spiritual delight by being in a state of only soul and no body. That should be the ultimate goal. And at the end of days, it's going to be a holy spiritual world without bodies. Nachmanides and most others disagree with that, and the Kabbalists disagree with that. The end of days, which will be the resurrection of the dead after Mashiach comes, everyone's coming back down here, and we're staying here. This is where we're going to experience the Messianic world, here in this world. We in Judaism do not believe that heaven is greater than earth. Do not believe that the higher worlds are holier, better places to be than the lower worlds. We don't do what we do in order to attain, more reward, more delight in the higher worlds. No, we don't. Will you attain reward? Yes, you will. Yes, you'll get there after you pass from this world before Mashiach comes. But that's not the goal. The goal of the mitzvah, the goal of the good deed. Yes, live kindly, live selflessly, live happily, live humbly, do mitzvot, do that which God asks you. And the point of all that is not to get rewards in the world to come, is not just to live the happy life here, is not for a self-serving reason. The point of all that is because through that you turn your physical life and the physical world around you into a holy place. And that is the purpose, the reason that God created anything. For one reason only, to turn the physical world into a holy place. In the Hebrew, we call it the Dira B'Tachtonim, the home for God in the lowest of realms. We could go on and on. It's such a powerful idea. It can transform every moment of our lives. But I want to conclude with a story. The story goes that there was a great Rebbe. His name was Reb Shmuel. I think Reb Shmuel, the astronomer tzaddik, and this is in the 19th century. And he was traveling on the road, and he had to stay at an inn. And he was sitting at the dining room in the evening, and he saw a person in the corner there that really caught his attention. There was many people in the room, drunks and people smoking and whatever, playing cards. But one person who was smoking as well, but he caught his attention. There was something different, something unique about this person. Sometimes you meet people and there's a certain grace, a certain peace, a certain calm, a certain vibe and energy about them that makes them truly, wow, I want to get to know them. So he wanted to get to know this person, but he was a little embarrassed. It's not easy everybody to approach a stranger. So the first night he decided, tomorrow night I'll still be here. I'll go over to him and introduce myself. The next night he comes to the dining room. He has his Talmud. He's busy studying. And then again he sees that person. He still looked at the same grace, the same aura about him. He says, let me finish my study and then I'll go over to him. By the time he finishes study, the person had already left. He decides tomorrow night, the third night, is my last chance. I better go see him. That night, the third night, he musters up the courage and he walks over to him and he says, "Hello, Rabid. Hello, my dear fellow Jew. How are you? Shalom Aleichem." The person responded, "Shalom Aleichem, Rebbe. Thank you for coming over." He tells him his name. The Rebbe asks him, "Can I ask you something?" He says, "Sure." So the Rebbe wanted to see what is so special about this person. So he says, "Who are you? What do you do?" And he was expecting like some holy answer. And the person said, I'm a simple man. I sell shoes for a living. No, but what do you do spiritually? Tell me about your spiritual life. Do you pray a lot? Do you study Torah a lot? The man said, Rebbe, I'm going to be honest with you. I can't lie in your face. I really don't. I can't even read. I know a little bit of prayers off by heart. I know the Shema. So every morning I recite the Shema. I don't know how to study Torah. I'm sorry, I don't do much of that. But the Rebbe was fishing. There's something about this person that is extraordinary. So he tells this person, do me a favor. Can you run through with me the schedule, the routine of your average day? The guy's surprised. The Rebbe's being so intrigued and curious about him. But sure. Rebbe, I wake up 5 every morning. I read the paper. I say my Shema, as I told you. I exercise, I go to the gym, I eat breakfast, I get to work. Like he runs through his day and he's already holding by the afternoon, the evening, and the Rebbe's not finding anything that sounds very impressive. All of a sudden, the person concluded. He said, and before I go to sleep, I make a prayer to God. And the prayer goes like this. Master of the world, I ask only one thing from you. If I don't have what it takes to fulfill the mission for which you created me for, don't wake me up tomorrow. Wake me up only if you believe I can do everything you need me to do in the world, in my life. That was his prayer every night. When the Rebbe Reb Shmuel heard that, he understood. That's why there's something so extraordinary about you. So friends, there is a purpose to your life. Like we started with Gary, that's the general purpose of all life, of all of existence, to turn the physical into something holy. Now, in your personal life, your life's conditions, your talents, your abilities, your skills, your circumstances, your relationships, your job, your community, your space in this world. Don't run away from it. Don't ignore it. Don't get schlepped and consumed by it. How can you turn yourself, your talents, your circumstances, your life into something holy? How can you permeate it with the goodness, the holiness, the mitzvot, the teachings of the Torah? That is the purpose. And eventually the whole world will become a holy world, a space that the entire world God can call his home. And then Mashiach comes. That is the end of the story. Thank you, my friends. Have a good night, and God bless you.